Hello everyone and welcome back. It's a blessing to speak with you again. We're going to pick up where we left off with the last podcast. We are truly blessed to live at the time of the conclusion of an actual war that is being fought. It might not seem like it at times because we're seeing the war and the fallout of the war all around us, but take heart. It's almost over and we've already won. And I'm not just saying that either. How many times have you heard that? Do you know what it truly means? If Satan and his angels have lost, and they would know that's true, then why are they fighting so hard? Do they think they still have a shot at victory? Are they trying to just do as much damage as they can before the end? I mean, what actually is really going on here? And what is our role in this? If you don't know what the actual spirit war that we fight in truly is, then this just doesn't seem to make much sense. The only sense you can make of it is to think that they believe they could still win. But that also doesn't make any sense because we know Jesus could just blink them out of existence with a thought. And furthermore, we know that they know this. One of the clearest statements directly from the enemy's mouth is found in Mark chapter 5, where the demons asked Jesus if he came to torment them before the day of judgment. There are a number of things that we can see from Mark chapter 5. 1, they know who Jesus is. 2, they know he has absolute power over them, and they are scared of him. 3, they don't know his plan. They don't know why Jesus is on earth at that point. And 4th, they know there is a day of judgment coming for them, and they know this without a doubt. So again, how can there be such a savage ongoing war being fought if it's already lost? To know the answer to that question, you have to start at the beginning, because this war starts in the Old Testament and ends in the New Testament. The Bible is full of events in this war, and I'm not going to try and cover them all even if I were able to. What I want to cover is the milestone events of this war. The first event we all know, and was the fall of Adam and Eve. This was not the start of the war, but a rebellion. Satan, for whatever reason, had rebelled against God. We all know what happened there, so I'm not going to dwell on this event. After Adam and Eve left the garden, humans began to populate the world, and at that time there were angels assigned to watch over them, but they too joined Satan's rebellion. Here too we all know what happened. God put this rebellion down with great force. Noah and his family, along with mating pairs of animals, were all that he saved from his judgment. The angels that joined Satan's rebellion, which we know as the Watchers, were and are still to this day chained up in the deepest pit of hell waiting for the great white throne judgment. Now keep in mind, Satan was not bound up with them, so at the point that Noah left the ark, the only rebel not locked up that we know of is Satan. If there were other fallen angels still with him at that point, we are not told, so I do not believe that to be the case. So there is a natural question here. Why didn't God also lock up Satan at this point? Well, I don't know. I can only speculate. My best guess is that Satan, while I have no doubt was urging and deceiving the Watchers to do what they did, he himself probably was smart enough not to take part in what they did. Again, that is just mere speculation, so take it only as such. One of the most fascinating podcasts, at least in my opinion, is our series on the antediluvian world and what it was like and what actually happened then, and also how it applies to what's going on right now. They are episodes 12, 13, and 14. And if you want to know more about the UFO phenomena we are seeing right now, watch this series. I highly encourage you to because, like I said, I think it's possibly one of our most interesting series. So after this, humanity is starting over with Noah and his family. And after some time, we come to the Tower of Babel. I want to play an 8-minute clip for you from Dr. Michael Heiser. He does a very good job in laying this out.
Right after Babel and the call of Abraham, that sets the stage for the rest of the Old Testament. This is why it's Israel against the nations, and the nations against Israel. And it's why it's Yahweh against the gods, and the gods against Yahweh. We've had a fall in Genesis 3. We've had a second rebellion in Genesis 6 that was so bad, that permeated humanity so deeply that God sends a flood. After the flood, Noah and his sons emerge from the ark, and God says to them, okay, we're going to try again. God repeats the original Edenic mandate to go forth, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, There's a reference in Genesis 9 to humanity still bearing the image of God. You're still my imagers. I want you to go out and do the original job of Eden. We're going to start over again. So do that. Spread out, populate, and spread my goodness, the knowledge of me throughout the world, and this is what I want done. So what do? They congregate at Babel. And at this point, God has had enough. This is why I refer to the Tower of Babel as the Romans 1 event of the Old Testament. If you read Romans 1, it talks about God giving humanity up to their sin. Just, okay, this is the way you want to live, have at it. We'll see how that goes. God has had enough at Babel. He divorces humanity. He disinherits them from being in his family. He cuts them off. He abandons them. He's angry. Now, we know it's not permanent because what he does next tells us that. God divorces humanity and says, okay, you don't want me to be your God. I'm still interested in you because you are my imagers. So I'm going to allot you. This is the language of Deuteronomy 4. Let's just go to Deuteronomy 4. This is the parallel to Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, Deuteronomy 4, 19, 20, where Moses is warning the people against worshiping the sun, moon, and stars, the host of heaven. Don't bow down unto them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance, as you are this day. You see the similarity in the language, the words for allotment, the words for inheritance. Okay, you go to Deuteronomy 17. We find out that this host of heaven they're actually gods. They're actually Elohim. Again, people are getting blamed. They've gone and served other gods and worshiped them, the sun, moon, or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden. They've served other, right here, let's open up our interlinear, other Elohim. It's not just astral stuff. Okay, this is the way other gods are described. You go to Deuteronomy 29. Again, this is all in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is actually good for something. It's good for a lot, but here we go. So this is talking about, hey, if Israel ever gets kicked out of land, people are going to say, what happened? Verse 24, all the nations will say, why has the Lord done thus to his land? What caused the heat of his great anger? Why is he so mad? Then the people will say, it is because they abandoned the covenant of the Lord, the God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went and served other gods and worshipped them, gods whom they had not known and whom he had not allotted to them. Okay, this is a whole system of theology. What happens at Babel is God says, look, I'm done. I am done with you people. But you're still my imagers, and so I'm going to assign you to lesser Elohim of my counsel, and I'm going to assign them to you. Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 32, it's two sides of the same coin. And what I want is they're going to be sort of placeholders. I want them to rule you, nations, even though it's not going to be me. I'm out of the picture here. You're getting stepdads now, stepgods. But I still want you people to be ruled according to my good character, my justice, my righteousness. You say, well, that wasn't in any of those verses. You're correct, it wasn't. But if you go to Psalm 82, where these gods are being judged by God in a divine council meeting, and God is really angry there, he actually sentences these other gods to death. I said, verse 6, Psalm 82, 6, I said to all of you, you are Elohim, all of you. The pronoun's plural too. You're all Elohim, you're all sons of the Most High, but you're going to die like men. Why are they being judged? Verses 2 through 5. For injustice, corruption, for sowing chaos in their nations. And also, if you go back to Deuteronomy 32, they accept worship. They encourage idolatry. which was a problem that began with Genesis 6. Okay, we're back there again. So they do a miserable job, and this is a judgment. This is a judgment against the world, against humanity. God, wants these people still governed well, because when he calls Abraham and makes Israel his own inheritance, when he makes a covenant with Abraham in Genesis 12, what does he say to Abraham? It's through your seed that all of these nations are ultimately going to be blessed. God still has the nations on his brain, as it were. But right now, his relationship is with Israel. It will be through Israel that the Messiah is raised up, that will bring all of this full circle and bring the nations back into the fold. This is why we have Paul. Okay, this is why we have an apostle to the Gentiles. Now, if you were a member of one of these other nations, you could join Israel in the Old Testament. Rahab did it. Okay, I mean, we had others that joined the nation. They forsook other gods and came into the fold. But it didn't happen en masse. They were mired in idolatry and wickedness. So Israel, this is why Israel has to be set off and set apart. They are to be a conduit of blessing and an example of blessing to the other nations, so that the lights would go on and they would say, man, what makes these people so different? They're prosperous, they're happy, they got some strange beliefs like they don't have idols and they pray to some invisible God. But I mean, what's up with that? And it was a means by which to have those conversations and bring people back into the fold. Now, ultimately, what's going to accelerate that is the coming of the Messiah, God as man. But in the Old Testament, what this does is creates a worldview circumstance, and this is it. Right after Babel and the call of Abraham, that sets the stage for the rest of the Old Testament. This is why it's Israel against the nations, and the nations against Israel. And it's why it's Yahweh against the gods, and the gods against Yahweh.
Now we know from Genesis and Deuteronomy that at the Tower of Babel event, God divided up the people into nations and set angels over those nations. And he kept Abraham for himself to create Israel, which will be his nation and his plan to bring us all back to him. This was all covered pretty well in the first episode in this series, so I won't dwell on the details here. But there is something important that I want to highlight. Sometime after this, there was another rebellion. The angels he set over the nations joined Satan in his rebellion, and God judged them. We see this in Psalm 82. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. He judges among the gods. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the poor and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. I said, you are gods. All of you are children of the Most High, but you shall die like men, and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. So God has pronounced a sentence on these rebels, but the execution of this sentence has not been carried out yet. And they, like Satan, have not been locked up yet like the Watchers are, but God is dealing with this rebellion. So what we have up until now is rebellions, but what comes next changes the entire nature of what is happening, because what comes next is God dealing with this rebellion. And he deals with it in a way that none of them saw coming, and it brings us, human beings, back to him if we are willing to accept him. We find this in Revelation chapter 12. Verses 1 through 6 tells us about Jesus coming to earth, his death, resurrection, and ascension. Verse 7 on tells us what happens after his ascension. And a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they have overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. Now there are many people who put this event during tribulation, but verses 1 through 6 tells us in context when this happened. After the finished work of Jesus, Satan has no claim or power or authority over anyone who belongs to Jesus, and at this point, the rebellion turned into open warfare, at which time Satan had his backside handed to him and was cast down to earth, to never enter the heavenly realm again. So they had been sentenced, and then they had been defeated. So why then did it turn into open warfare? What is their goal?
You just ask yourself a simple question. What do, if the principalities and powers and the rulers, the powers of darkness, if they know this stuff, and by now they do because, it's out in the open. What do they fear? What do they fear? They fear their own destruction, which means they fear the success of the Great Commission. Romans 15. For I tell you that Christ became a servant to the circumcised, to show God's truthfulness, in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs. And in order, you have the Jews in one audience, but the other audience is the Gentiles, in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy, as it is written, therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles and sing to your name. And again it is said, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people. And again, praise the Lord, all you Gentiles, let the peoples extol him. So here, again, he links the resurrection with Gentile ministry, not just Jews, but Gentile ministry. Now, what's going on here? If you look at Romans 15, the end of it, verse 12, Paul tacks on one other verse. And again, Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles. Now, the root of Jesse, this is messianic language, the branch, the Old Testament would have, or root, or the stump. Interestingly enough, just sidebar, isn't it interesting that for the king, for the Messiah, here once again we have tree, i.e. garden imagery, used of the Messianic king. But again, that's a sidebar. We spent a lot of time on cosmic gardens and all that stuff. But here we have the root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles. In him will the Gentiles hope. Now what's interesting here is if we turn our interlinear on, arises is the verb anistemi. It means to rise up, There's another word used for the same thing that means, again, to rise up. Both of them are used for the resurrection. But anistemi is one that's noteworthy because the noun form of this is anastasis, which is the New Testament word for resurrection. That's anastasis, resurrection. And what's kind of cool is if we go to, I don't know if I have it open, but I'm going to open it here. If we go to the Septuagint, I'm going to show you the English Septuagint here, English translation. Paul's writing in Greek, Septuagint in Greek. And if I remember my Septuagint numbering correctly, Septuagint, Psalm 82 is not 82, it's 81. Septuagint has different numbering. We read here, again, this is Psalm 82. God assembled, in the divine assembly with the gods. He's going to judge the gods. He rails on them for the chaos they sow in their nations. He says, I said you're gods, you're all children of the Most High. Again, Most High is the term used in Deuteronomy 32 for the divorce of the nations. But now you're going to die as humans, and as one of the rulers, you're going to fall. Stand up, O God, the psalmist says. Rise up, judge the earth, because you will inherit all the nations. Guess what? It's the same verb as this one. Paul links Jesus' resurrection, resurrection specifically to rule of the Gentiles. He knows his Old Testament. They're again, under foreign supernatural domination. The gods over here have to be dealt with, and they are dealt with by the resurrection. Again, there are several passages like this in the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, where the verb and the noun of resurrection is linked to the rule of Gentile territory. This is why Paul knows his Old Testament really well. This is why Paul, when he thinks of resurrection and he thinks of ascension, he associates it up here mentally and theologically as being the key to diminishing, to stripping away, Colossians 2, to stripping away the authority, disarming the rulers, the principalities and powers over the nations. And ultimately, as the kingdom progresses, let's go back to 1 Corinthians 15, a couple clicks back here. Ultimately, it's not going to be just disarming. When the Great Commission is accomplished, okay, when basically all the people are gathered, then comes the end, and he delivers the kingdom to God the Father. Then he's going to destroy them. He's going to destroy them. It's no longer disarming, it's destroying. Now, I often get asked, on talk shows or interviews or whatever, about spiritual warfare and how does all this factor into spiritual warfare. The first thing we have to realize is that Paul's ministry was a tough one. Just because Paul believed on the basis of Scripture and the basis of the reality of the resurrection and the ascension, that the authority of the supernatural powers of darkness in all these places, these Gentile dominions, just because he believed that their authority had been taken away, doesn't mean they're leaving. Okay, they're going to fight for their turf. They're going to do all they can to blind the people who live under their charge to the gospel. They don't want to lose their worship. They enjoy enslaving their populations. They hate Yahweh. They hate God's people. The last thing they want is to lose their own subjects to the real king. Okay, they are going to continue to fight. This is why Paul talks about spiritual warfare. Okay, we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers, in the heavenlies. Okay, it is a conflict. They're not dead yet. They're not destroyed yet. They will be, and they know it because of Psalm 82 and other passages. They know that. But Paul, again, has linked the coming of the kingdom and with it the day of the Lord in the end and the destruction of these supernatural beings. He's linked it in Romans, we just read the passage, to something called the fullness of the Gentiles. When the fullness of the Gentiles is brought in, then Israel will awaken. And all Israel will be saved. And that needs to happen too. That needs to happen too. So do you see what that means? Paul, in his, again, biblical theology, links the success of the Great Commission to the return of the Lord, the day of the Lord, and the destruction, the final destruction of all the cosmic powers. So when I get asked, what is spiritual warfare? Okay, it's not shouting at demons. Okay, it's not, these confrontational things that we think of with spiritual warfare, spooky stuff like we're Ghostbusters or something, okay? It's not that. I've talked to plenty of missionaries and they have those episodes, and people over here too, they have these episodes. They're real and it could happen. But that is not the ultimate end game. It's not even the ultimate battle. It's not really even what it's about. What it's about, you just ask yourself a simple question. What if the principalities and powers and the rulers, the powers of darkness, if they know this stuff, and by now they do because, it's out in the open. What do they fear? What do they fear? They fear their own destruction, which means they fear the success of the Great Commission. Okay? Their game plan, do they think they can win? Well, of course they don't. They don't think they can beat the Most High. They don't think they're going to kill him off. Okay, they're not idiots, all right? But what they do believe, what they do know, is that the longer we kick the Great Commission can down the road, the longer we blind people to the gospel, the longer it takes to reach whatever point this is, and only God knows when the fullness of the Gentiles is accomplished and Israel awakens, the longer we can keep that in the future, we survive. That's the game plan. That's how they are going to define victory. We're still here. And this is spiritual warfare. It is focused on the Great Commission. So what I try to advise people is, look, I know spiritual warfare sounds sexy. Again, and it's because of the way it's sort of been Hollywoodized and whatnot. And like it would just be the highlight of our day to get into a conflict with a demon. Okay, what the highlight of your day ought to be is winning somebody to the Lord. Okay, because that is what they fear. They don't fear getting kicked out of a room or, I got to go possess somebody now else, No, what they fear is their own destruction. And the only thing that's going to lead to that is the success of the Great Commission. That is biblical theology.
We're on the threshold of the fullness of the Gentiles. Our role in this very real war is to advance the kingdom and facilitate its advancement in any way that we can. We will be rewarded for this work and our obedience to Jesus. This war is almost at its conclusion, and when it ends, also ends our opportunity to lay up treasure in heaven. Whatever time we have left, use it to fight as hard as you can in this war.